Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Friday. Today we're going to be completing this epic mountain city. We're doing part 8, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be adding in a whole bunch of stuff. For instance, we want to add in a little island right here that's going to act as a place for customs and for a lighthouse. We're going to add a dock or harbor port right here, and then we're also going to add maybe some hanging or perched up buildings up on top of here as well. So there's quite a few things that we're going to be creating. And then I'll also want to probably add in the last little details, such as adding movement or direction to the water, as well as adding in those last bit of crop bits, which is where our green is. So that's pretty much it. So there's still a lot to cover. I did make a little bit of a sketch using the line tool, though with the dotted line you can kind of see the sketch, just to kind of give you a visualization of what we're going to be adding to the map. And I also added some notes as well to kind of make it clear what everything was. So I'll go start first with that customs island I have right there, which I believe I am calling that Faragoi Island or Faragoi. And ships wanting to have their goods hauled up to the city to its lucrative markets must first stop at Faragoi Island. All commercial goods must first be inspected by customs office atop the island alongside the Great Lighthouse. So basically, this is where your first step to getting into the city. It's basically a checkpoint. Hey, Lilac Lilith, glad that you're here. Lilith, I think I pronounced it right. Welcome. So Faragoi Island is going to be our first step. So we'll start with that. Again, this is basically like a customs or like a checkpoint. Now, I've memorized what the sketch looks like, but I'll leave it up just for a little bit longer to kind of give you ideas of what we're doing. You see all the boats, the island. You can see the movement of the water. Hey, Tang Westel, glad that you're here. So you can see there's quite a bit to cover here. It won't take too long, so we'll be able to cover all of it here. But let's go and start with that island first. This is a lake, just so there's no confusion here. What you have is a river over here, and then that river flows underneath the city, and then it comes out of this statue right here, and it flows down into this lake. And then this lake also transforms into a river that goes out to the ocean. So it has a way of connecting ships to get up to this lake and then go to its port. So it's kind of an important part of this town is to have that commerce. It's a big part because how are these people eating? You see, there's not a lot of crops here. You need to have some way for them to feed these people and to make sure that they have jobs. And so with that comes a lot of commerce because there's just not enough space for all the crops. And I didn't put a whole lot on screen. So it's a big question people will ask. How many crops does your city have? It comes up a lot. Okay, so I'm going to delete the sketch. I think you get the general idea. I'm going to select it and delete it. And then I'm going to create that island. And I'll start with the shape tool to do that. And generally what I use is some kind of cliff. So I'll go with over to here. I'm going to choose a cliff of my choice. There should be a whole bunch of options that we can choose from here. There's a lot of different cliffs that we can work with. I think the one that I have selected is okay. What I'll do is let's use the pen to make the island. When I make any kind of island, a river island, an island along maybe a world map along a coastline, or if I make an island along a lake, what I'll try to do is I'll make sure that the island kind of fits to the contour of the landscape. So if you'll notice here, on this part right here, there's this contour to where the mountain reaches that lake at the bottom. So you know what would be a good idea is to make the island mimic some of that curvature. And because what happened was water flow probably eventually eroded this. So eventually the mountain probably looked more like this. But through water and through erosion, wind, it opened up this part right here. And so that way it there's a continuity between the island and then that part of it that broke off and then the main piece. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind when you're setting up an island. So now that I've done that, I kind of get the general idea. I'm going to create that contour. So I'll go in right here. I'm going to use the pen. And I am using like a stylus, a pen. You can do it with a mouse as well. So I'll place it down here. I think that is the wrong type of stamp, but that's okay. I can fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to change the scale, and I'll probably just change the saturation a bit. Oopsie, wrong one. My bad. There we go. Okay, that looks good. Let's bring the the brightness down a little bit. And then what I also need to do is I need to change it over to a clip mask for fill, so that way I can paint whatever I want on top of it. Bring the brightness down a little bit. There we go. And then I want to create a little bit more room for that island. So I don't want to have it like super close. I want to create a little bit of distance between the island. And this will also kind of break up the negative space. You'll notice that there's a lot of water here and there's nothing going on inside of it. So this lake island will also break up that negative space. What I'm also going to do is I want to maybe create multiple levels. So like maybe it's not just this flat surface at the top. So I can create another series of cliffs. I make sure merge shape is off. And then I can go in again and then create maybe another cliff like this. And that will represent another layer. So that way it's not all on one level. And that creates that sense of depth, right? Never is there just one cliff and there's just flat on top. There's generally various layers of cliffs giving it this sense of depth. And then that highest point is likely where we're going to have our lighthouse. And then maybe that second plateau below it will be maybe where our customs building goes. So that will work out nice. What I'll do next is creating a platform. This one's really, really important. I mentioned this in previous videos, but there's this awesome stamp called platform. You can use it with the shape tool. You're going to use it as a stroke, and then make sure the clip mask is set for fill. And what you'll do is you can just single click. You can do this easily with a mouse. You don't need a pen for this at all. And just kind of follow the contour of the shape. Then when you press enter, you'll have this nice shape right here. Now you might have to flip it because sometimes it's facing the wrong way. So now I've created a platform or the foundation for where that structure is going to be. Let's create the foundation for the customs building. So I'll create another platform or another part that goes up here like this against here. Press enter, plus, and now we have two sections right there. So that works out well. So the next step is I maybe want to create some of it underwater. Hey, Keife, glad that you're here. I'm going to take that whole island, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the fill off, and I'm going to go down a couple layers, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And what I want to create is this illusion of underwater. So I'll go ahead and then change the blend mode over to luminosity. And then I'll change some settings with the stroke. I'll probably bring the contrast down and the brightness down. And then what I can do is just kind of make it just big enough to where you can see it. And then I can also just drop the opacity a little bit. There you go. And now you have some parts of the island underwater. And what's nice is you don't have to have it all be perfectly centered. You could have some of it look like this. Some part of the island is like that. Or you can move it all the way to over here to have it like that. It's really up to you which way you want to do it. I think to stick with the angle, I'll maybe go like this to where the majority of the cliff is on the front side. And I think that will work out rather nicely. So I'm probably going to now fill in, select everything. So I'll select this whole thing, create group, and I'm just going to call this the rock and foundation. Okay. And then I'm going to make sure to put that down a layer so that way I have plenty of building room to go on top. So now I can take this whole island and kind of move it around to make it closer and to figure out where I want it to be, right? So I'll kind of put it here. I want to have enough room for ships to go around. What I'll probably do now is I want to use some kind of texture to fill in the blocks or these foundations right here because it looks kind of odd. So I'll probably want to pick a texture that looks good. You can use a series of different ones. Like if you want, you could use this gray one right here. If it matches in, what works is which one the texture looks best with this. This looks a little dark, so I could go with a lighter texture. Like this one might work a little bit better. Let's bring the scale down. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Okay. I think these stones will kind of represent the foundation, and I've kind of decided where it is. So next I want to actually add some access points. Like how is it that you get up on top of this island? How is it that you get up to each platform on this island? And then we can decide where to put the structures and stuff, because whenever I finish building from the ground up, I then add access. So now we have to figure out, how do people get up to this place? And so there are a series of stamps called stairs, and there's some natural stairs that work really well. Like right here, you'll see some natural stairs right here. And some of this stuff is from a new pack within Watercolor Cities, is Dwarven stuff, and I will showcase some of that stuff. But first, we'll go ahead and just use just this staircase right here. I'm going to desaturate it so that it kind of matches the same material like this. And then what I'll have is, you'll have a two-way process to get up this place. This place, you'll have, the first one will be, you'll have to go up this stairs to go up to this one. That looks a little dark. Let's bring the brightness up. So there's stairs to go up to that one, and then I'll create another staircase that kind of goes up this way like this. And so that way there's kind of access to get up to this one, and then access up to the next point. And then from there, I'll probably want to create some docks so that ships can port or drop anchor right at this location. So let's do that. Line tool. And we're just going to use these docks. We're going to use the line, and then I'll just create like this dock that kind of goes all the way around, kind of not all the way around the island, but around this front part right here. And then we can even create like maybe a private dock that's going to go down at the bottom right here. So maybe like the person who runs the customs or whatever, maybe that's a private dock that goes up to that. So what we could do is just take another staircase that goes down to that one like this, and then make sure that there's access to get down to that one. I want to make sure that these are at the right layer too. There we go. They were a little too low. And then I'll also want to add maybe a series of docks that people can go off of. So I'll just use the line tool again, and then just take a couple of these, copy, paste, do another one, put it right here, copy, paste another one, put it right here like this, rotate a little bit. Now you'll have these series of docks, and there's rooms for these ships and boats to dock. And then if they want to go up, they can go up by just clicking or going right up this part right here. And I think I'll scale it down a little bit to fit it. There we go. I think that about looks right. Sure, I can show you the whole city. Emerald Third Eye. This is the whole city so far. You've gotten a lot done. So a lot has happened. So I'm excited. This is going to be fun. We have a lot to do, but we'll be able to finish it all. Okay, so we've done those docks, and we've added those points. So I think all of the access points are there. I think what we need to do is start adding in the actual structures. So we can type in lighthouse, or you can just construct your own. If I type in light, there should be these lighthouses right here. I can use any one of these as a lighthouse. I can even create a second platform that should go on top. Let's do that. Let's create another platform. But this time I'm going to use the square shape like this. And I'm going to make sure that it fits to the right square. And then I'll just put this right on top like this. And what this will do is, I have a lot of asymmetry on this island right here. You can see there's a lot of asymmetry, right? There's no 90-degree angles. But by adding in a square, I've added some more symmetrical shapes, which is going to contrast against the asymmetry of the rocks and those foundations. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and place this lighthouse right on top like this. And to show that it's a tall building, that there's height to it, the trick to showing height is contrast. So I'm going to go ahead and create a custom shadow for this object. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to set it to 0, 0, so that way it's centered. And then I can create this large intense blur or intense shadow. And when I take a step away from it, you'll see how much of it actually pops out because of that heavy shadow. So the trick to height or depth is to use contrast. And just a simple drop shadow with kind of a thicker intensity and a larger drop shadow can kind of create that contrast to allow things to pop out. So this is that building right here. Let's also maybe throw in some access points to get up to it. So let's maybe throw some stairs that go along right here. That stairs is going to accommodate that rock stair there. And then we'll flip this stamp right here. And then this staircase will accommodate leading over to the private dock down there over here. So you have those access points set up. And then maybe I want to take some kind of fortified building to act as maybe the customs building, right? What happens if they get attacked? A fortified structure should keep them safe, or at least barricaded away from the danger. So we'll add some kind of building that's going to act as that. So what I'll do is I'll maybe just choose this large structure right here, and then maybe I can add a series of like towers to it to make it look like it's more fortified. So I'll add these in the corners. I think that looks good. And then I can, if I want, maybe add in some special things near the entrance. So sometimes I'll like to add maybe some little towers right here at the entrance of those staircases. Maybe another one right here like this. Oopsie, I think I'm on the wrong layer there. Let's go up. So now you have like some stairs. These are, think of them as like maybe identifying or showing where the entrance and exits are. So you have those steps there. And then what I like to do lastly is I'm thinking what we want to do is maybe throw in some external building or auxiliary buildings. First, let me fix the shadows with these. The default shadows is kind of this black or bluish color. And so what I really want to use is more of that black color. So I'll go ahead and make sure to fix these shadows real quick. There we go. Get a little blur in there. There we go. Get some shadow work to kind of make it look a little high up. And then what I can do is that maybe I can add just a couple things. Like maybe there's a small market. I mean, it is a port, right? It's the port. So what would be a good idea is maybe adding some market stalls just on the outside. People are kind of sharing their wares and kind of like talking about how things are going, and they can, you know, kind of work out with people, these kind of things. So having just a little bit of a little tiny little market, nothing big. The main market is up here. That's kind of the hallmark, but we can totally add in a small market down here just to kind of put right in front of the customs office. So I think that kind of helps. And then I think what we should do is also have some other auxiliary buildings. Like an auxiliary building could be something like an outhouse, or maybe a small house where servants might live, or a small building where horses might be, or where you might store goods, you know, or contraband, since it's a customs building. So when you think about that stuff, think about what kind of auxiliary buildings would be there. And what I normally like to use are things like these shacks right here. These work great as auxiliary buildings. What makes them nice is they're made of wood, while these other structures like the lighthouse are made of stone. And so that way it will kind of show the importance of the structure. The wooden ones are clearly smaller and made of a cheaper material. And so therefore there are auxiliary buildings, while the central structures are made of stone, and it'll contrast against that. And so then it will make it clear that these buildings aren't quite as important as the main structure. And it will also add some warm brown colors to this gray bonanza that we kind of have here. So that kind of helps. So now we have all of those things there. We could add some extra stuff up here. Little details that it's always nice to add are things like crates and barrels. Are great little tiny details, and great places to put them are right next to the auxiliary buildings, right, where you might expect some storage to be. So always kind of nice to add in those kind of things. So some crates, let's add in barrels, let's get some crates over here. And of course it's a market, so it kind of makes some sense to add some crates and some barrels in the market as well. Just make sure you don't block the walkway leading up to here. So I'm not going to put a crate right in the front right there, right? I'm not going to put a crate right here or right here, right? So I'm only going to put them in places where they kind of feel like they make the most sense, these auxiliary buildings. So now we've kind of added the details. The last thing that I really want to add to this, I think that would be good, is probably the light for the lighthouse, right? So what I'm going to have to end up doing here is I'm going to take this, I'm going to lock this right here. Let me see if I can grab that little lighthouse. I can just take this right here and select stamp only. I'm going to select this lighthouse. I'm going to do some editing away from here so I don't accidentally select anything. And what I'll do is I'm going to do multiple layers. First, this is the top of the lighthouse, or part of the lighthouse. I'm going to take a light source. And, you know, I don't really care for the light sources in this style. So I'm going to go into Fantasy Battle Maps real quick. I'm going to grab some light sources from there. So there should be some nice lights in here. Let's use this yellow one right here. And I'm going to stack a couple just right on top. Just right on top like there. Let's go up a couple layers. And then I'm going to take another stamp from Watercolor Cities. And what might work is maybe using something like this one right here or maybe a different color one. Since the light is this yellowish color, we could use blue. And then just take a blue one and just put it on top of that. And that way it won't look like the light is on top of the roof of where the torch is. It looks like it's underneath of it. So that way you have the light underneath and at the top of the actual lighthouse. And then what you can also do is maybe throw on maybe some light sources that are kind of going out like this. So I can take that light source like this, let's make it a little bit bigger. And then I can kind of create this illusion of light coming out of the lighthouse like this, just right on top like that. I think the lighthouse looks good. And then I'll go ahead and create group. We're going to call it lighthouse. And then I'm going to place that just right on top, right here like this. There we go. So now, and I'll make sure we're going to go up some layers to make sure the light is all the way on top. There we go. Now you have a nice lighthouse right there. We've done a lot of changes here at 133 changes. Let's save it. And then I think we can move on to the next part. I think I'm going to add boats and stuff last, or close to last. So we'll save. And let's go ahead and create this kind of dockyard plus little tiny settlement that exists along these cliffs. Because what I have is there's a lot going up on the top part and on the left side, but there's just so much negative space down here. And I really want to fill that up. And I want to create multiple locations that are distinct and different from each other so that your players, when they visit this city, there's a lot of different options that they can do. They can go to the lighthouse, they can go to this perched like settlement on the cliffs, they can go to the main part of the city, they can go up to the temple. I want to have multiple locations so that my players have a lot to explore. And of course it provides even more details that you can put into your lore when you're adding all these different locations. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in that. I've babbled enough. So right down here, I've created this little staircase. And then here we're going to have maybe a walkway that kind of goes down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a series of shrines right here. Oopsie, I'm using the wrong one. My mistake. I'm going to put a series of shrines right here. And these shrines represent the twin aspects of this god, this water god called Theron Finfolk. Okay, and so what we'll do is these twin aspects are like maybe their divine side and a human side, or it could be their land side, which is their legs, and then when they go into the water, they convert into like an amphibious-like creature with like a tail and stuff. So then that can represent the two aspects of this god, and then that way we have a reason for those shrines, and then we have a series of aesthetics. People, or these kind of Mistborn monks that kind of guard and then do daily rituals to kind of to please or honor the water god so that the water will keep flowing from the statue or from the river. In other words, it's an abundance ritual to keep the water flowing. Much of the culture, its commerce, comes from the water. And so the whole religion has been built around this concept of water as being, it provides life, it provides commerce, provides drinking, cooking, so many things that the water provides for us. And so that's why I've added a water temple in over here. So water is a big deal for this civilization. All right, let's go get building here. So I'll probably use some kind of like bridge, or I can use a series of like docks or something to kind of represent the path that will lead through here. So I'll use the pen for this. I'm going to connect like this. And what I'm going to try to do is create these points that kind of lead up to here, just right here. I think right about there looks good. I'm going to make sure that the path isn't too massive. Like that's a big dock. We can bring the scale down. I think there we go. That looks good. And then I'll put a shrine of some kind on there, so I can type in shrine, or I can use one of these maybe, like a fortified shrine. And I'll bring the scale up, and then I'll connect it right here like this. And then now we have one water shrine there, and then we'll have another shrine probably right here, I think should be good. Maybe close to the same amount of distance, just so they're right next to the statue. And then I'll go ahead and create the next dock part that kind of goes down through here like this. And I'll have it go along here like this, and then I'll go off screen over here. There we go. And that will add the next part. So now we have access to the shrines, access to where the statue is. Now we need to create a series of, let's add the dock the Mistborn Dock. I just want to add these access points to the shrines. Let's add the docks. I got some lore on that. So we have this Mistborn Docks. They're named after the morning mist that kind of creeps eerily along the lake's waters in the early morning. And so it's the home of many types of adventurers. There's sell swords, sell sails, merchants, fishers, and diplomats from faraway cities. They all come to Mistborn before they climb the Aegir steps up to the city proper. So it's kind of important to know that this Mistborn is kind of like the next to the customs office. This is where you go next, right? You go to this Mistborn location, you go into those docking area, and then that's where you'll have longer docking permissions. Like along that customs island, Faragoi Island, maybe you're only allowed to port there for a certain number of time, but the docks at Mistborn are more open. You can dock your ship there for a much longer period. And so that's where everyone kind of goes first before they climb the Aegir steps up into the city proper. Okay, so let's go ahead and create those docks. So what I want to do is I want to create the docks that kind of start at the bottom here, and then they go along this cliff right here. So I'll go back to the line tool. I'm going to use my docks. I'm going to have them connect all the way to the land, and then just kind of follow along the base of the cliff here. And I'm just going to stop right here. Any closer to the falls, and it just becomes a little too turbulent for ships to kind of come along. And so I won't even add a dockyard there. And then I'll also add maybe some staircases that kind of lead up to it. So I'll use these wooden stairs right here. These will work just fine. I'm just going to place it just right on top. They look a little too bright than the staircase. I'll just bring it down a little bit. There we go. And now we have a little staircase that kind of winds up to the docks. And then just like before, I can take these dock pieces and just kind of place them all along here like this. So I want to have a dock along here, copy paste another one, put that right here, just like we did before with the island, right? Copy paste. And then another one like this. And then when I finish this map, I'll absolutely make sure that this map is clonable for your own personal use, okay? No worry about that. I'll make sure that that happens. So we're going to put maybe a double kind of dock situation. Like we can maybe put one right here like this. So that way their ships can kind of tuck in a little bit more here. I think that would look good. So we've got the access points. All the docks are right here. But we also want to create these series of platforms. Oh, am I losing you guys? I hope I'm not buffering too much. So I'm going to use a series of platforms for the structures to stand upon. So in the Elven, if you go into watercolor cities and you'll notice in Elves, there are these nice wooden platforms right here. I think these are going to be perfect. And what I want to do is I want to have this series of multi-leveled circular platforms in which a series of huts and structures are built upon. So I'll go ahead and add, like, what I normally like to do is add like a big one. And then let's maybe add a medium-sized one over here, another medium-sized one, and then let's add maybe one on top right here. Let's make a smaller one that goes up on top right here. And we can even maybe add some stairs that attach to that platform, to that walkway up there. So that way there is a way to go up from here to here as well, so that we can create some multiple access points. Let's also put maybe another one right here. Okay. Once I've added the platforms, I need to do what? Create access, right? So how do you get up to these platforms? We want to add a series of staircases. Let's go ahead and move these a little further in so it can create some distance between me and the docks. There we go. Okay. Let's take a staircase. Let's use this smaller one. And then we have access that goes up to that one. Right there. We have another one that goes up to this one. And then let's maybe add some curved staircases. Maybe one that kind of leads up to this here. And then let's add another one that maybe goes up to this one. Like that. So now you have those multiple platforms. Okay. And then, oh yeah, we missed one. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way. And then we'll go ahead and add in that next access point right here. Going up to here. That works out great. There we go. So now we have the access. And then we can put our structures up here. But I also want to maybe put in a staircase that kind of goes like right here, up from this place up to here. And this will create this extra sense of depth, right? Now you know that this platform is almost level with this walkway right here, but this platform is higher up than that one. So you're creating this multiple sense of depth. Okay, and then the next step that I'll want to do here is I probably want to add some structures, right? So what I want to do is maybe add some buildings of some kind. And I think what I'll do is I'll use these little tower structures right here. I don't want these to be like, because the platforms are made of wood, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have stone buildings resting on wooden platforms, right? That means that the materials on which that are on top of the platform are heavier than the materials used to prop them up. And that's not going to make for the most sturdy foundation. So it might be best to use wooden structures to be put on top of these wooden platforms. And so we have a series that we can use. And what here I see a lot of circles and stuff. And so to break up those curves, I'll maybe add in a couple square buildings to it. It doesn't mean that every building has to be square. It just means we can add in some square ones. So I'll add in a circular one at the top. This can be like an important shop, or it can be like maybe the owner of an important part of the dock yard, or whatever it might be. That's why it's up at the top here, right? Maybe it's the residence of the dock owner, or whatever it might be. And then I can create another circular one just right here in this corner right here, just kind of hanging out. Maybe another one right there. So now I have a series of buildings right here. They can be whatever you want them to be. I would generally make them in things like maybe they're shops, maybe there's some smugglers, maybe there's an appraiser here, maybe there's a potion shop or a general store. Those kind of buildings would work well with a port, right? When people dock and they come in, they're looking for goods and services to help them on their next journey as they're trading. So adding in that necessary infrastructure is important. But you can also add buildings where people live as well. So maybe right here is where you go your infrastructure. That's why it's closest to the land right here, closest to this over here. And then in this next one, maybe this can be like the square, the town square, or the settlement where people live. So we can have a series of structures in here. I don't want it all to be perfectly square. We want to add a student. So we'll have a couple here. Let's put one here, and then another one right here. I want to make sure there's room for people to walk around. So this will be basically where the residents are, people who permanently work within these shops, work on the docks, work in the mines that's right next to the dockyard. All of those people need to live somewhere, right? They probably don't live on the ship since they're permanent residents. They're going to live somewhere. They're going to live on this platform right here. So, and then we'll add maybe a larger structure up at the top right here. This could be maybe a more wealthier person that lives there. And of course, I can take all of these. We'll select all from this set. And I'm going to make sure to add a shadow, because right now, they're all look like they're kind of flat. So I'll bring the shadows up. Oop, we got black for the color. There we go. And then now it kind of looks like they're popping up a little bit more. There we go. Great. And then I can just copy and paste these now. So copy and paste. Put one in the center, and then I'll just copy and paste a couple along here. You can also add buildings as well along the dock itself, like along here. But to show that they're further down, just bring the brightness down a little bit. And that way it doesn't look like it's at the same distance or as high up, because you're using contrast. So I'm going to take some of these ones, darker ones, place them right along the dock. And that way not everything is accessed by going up to these platforms. You'll have a couple of these along the dock. So I think that will be important. And then you can even add maybe one on the far side of the dock, like maybe there's a house, like a boathouse or something that's here on the edge. So you can put one out at the edge there. We can put one maybe right here as well. There we go. So just some buildings along here. And it doesn't hurt. You could also throw in some markets if you wanted to as well. Like we could remove some of these buildings, and then we can also throw in some market buildings. And then that way you would kind of complete that part. So I'll kind of use these more brownish colors. I think I like these browner colors better instead of the bright colors. That way I'll kind of distinguish that it's not as distinguished as the other markets. So just maybe a couple there. There we go. And then maybe we'll add a couple over here as well. Let's go with this one. And then another one right here. Okay. Then you have a couple little markets, as you would kind of expect in kind of a port-like area. All right. So I think we're getting close. We've done a lot here. We've got that island. We've got the lighthouse. We've added in this landscape, or this little part right down here. But next I wanted to add in like a little settlement along the cliff right here. And this was going to be pretty much run by a famous smuggler. Their base of operations is here. And what I wanted to do is have this smuggler be basically the city prefect's biggest benefactor. That means they give them money and for protection, basically. So basically bad guys. Okay, so because I had it to where there was a conflict between the Ironborough elves or dwarves right here. There's kind of a, I would say like some unrest going on between lower classes, which are these dwarves that live down here in the mines, and then the more upper crusty folk that live up here in the elite section. So the city is pretty corrupt, and so I want to make sure that I'm making it clear that it's corrupt. And so putting a smuggler, being one of the very first characters that you kind of run into, is a smuggler up at this base up here. And so I think that will kind of really get the point across that this city is without a doubt corrupt. Okay, so let's go ahead and first create the access to kind of get up to this place. Let's create the part of the city first. So 1 second here. I'm going to go ahead and copy paste these. What I want to do is I'm going to have a series of platforms kind of jutting off from this boardwalk right here. And then I can use the same concept of using these platforms right here, but I'll just kind of use a smaller one. And these kind of are going to represent basically some buildings where your players can meet the corrupt guy. And I'm going to go ahead and place one suspended like this. And then the only way to get to it is through, is to go off onto these small points right here. Oopsie, let me push this up a layer. Make sure my platforms are all the way up. I'm going to copy paste that one here. There we go. This should somewhat isolate the larger platform, giving it a little bit more, protection. Okay, and then also maybe this smuggler is like extracting a toll from people to use this shrine. And if anybody tells any of those monks within the shrine, they'll come down on you. So always good to throw in a little extra corruption in there. So let's go ahead and throw in maybe some kind of larger structure. I think a thieves guild might work pretty good. And it's kind of the same, kind of structure that the prefecture is made, right? And so to kind of make the connection that the prefecture is kind of owned and bought by that smuggler, I'll use the same building, but I'll just use a different color. And then this way it will make it clear that there is a connection between those two. So I'll go ahead and just put a structure right here on top. This will act as that structure. And then I'll probably need to throw in some access stuff. So maybe I want to put like a staircase to show that this platform is higher up. You add some staircases. That should work. I think those staircases go up. And then, of course, what do we always do? We want to also add in some outbuildings. But what I'll do is I'll probably have some of these auxiliary buildings be fortified. So I'll throw in some fortified buildings here along the edge here. These can act as locations for servants, or it could be where you store goods, whatever it might be. It can be a lot of different things. Remember, the auxiliary building, it really depends on its function, right? Like, what is it that this larger building needs, this larger facility needs? It needs storage. It needs places for people to live. Always kind of remember that concept when you're making your auxiliary buildings. I'm going to go ahead and quickly add the shadow to this structure as well. There we go. Okay. And then I can maybe create some like sentry towers or something that are right here, and that will kind of work well. And then of course, to really show the height of this platform, I'll really show the height of that platform. I'm going to add another staircase that goes up to here. This will really sell the height thing. And of course, height always gives you an advantage for defense. So now we have the height differentiation, and you can go up here and then talk to this smuggler. They kind of control this kind of complex right here. And then, of course, we have to figure out how exactly we're going to get there. So I think I need to add a little bit of land right there. I missed some stuff. Let's go ahead and let's create the access. Like, how is it they get up here? So I can use a series of these staircases. One right here, and then I'll flip it. And then another one kind of going up this way. And then I'll add another one going up this way. Right here, let's just bring it down a layer. There we go. Up the steps, and then you'll have this staircase that kind of goes up. And of course, it makes sense to maybe add some kind of dock at the bottom, because how exactly are they going to get there? So I'll just go ahead and put a dock right here like this. And that way there's a little dock, private dock, probably for this guy right here who lives in here, that kind of goes up to here and then to this next shrine. So we've done a lot here in this area. Let's go ahead and save it. Thank you. I'm loving how much our chat is just exploding with people chatting. I absolutely love to see that. Sorry, I haven't been paying much attention to it. Been very focused on what I'm working on. So I appreciate everyone's help in the chat. You are all so amazing. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we'll let this save, and then we'll go ahead and add in real quick some final details for that water region, and then we'll finish off the crops, and we'll do the water direction as well. Some water details like waves, reflections in the water, things like that. So we'll make sure to add all of that stuff. So let's go ahead and put in some boats first. And I'm going to put in a lot. So there needs to be both larger boats and smaller boats. So what I'll do is I'll put the larger ones kind of over here at these docks where it might be a little bit more, might not be quite as shallow. So I'll put some big docks, big ones along here, another one right here. Let's maybe put another one that's kind of coming in that direction. So I'll have it going off screen there. So the big ships are kind of close to the large island, and then I'll take the smaller boats and then put them all along here. Like maybe these can be fishermen's boats. They can be a lot of different things. So we'll all put them all along here. Put in a lot of them. I really want to show the importance of the connection to the water, to this lake, how important the lake, the waterfall, and the river that goes out to the ocean, why all these things are so important. And to really put that emphasis across, I'm going to add in a lot of boats. This will really get the emphasis across that water is an important part of this civilization. So I'm just going to add a bunch of boats along here. Let's put a larger one along here. I think the smuggler should have a larger one right here. I think that looks good. And then I'll put a whole bunch out here. I'll even scale them down to make a couple even look a little smaller. That way there's kind of a variation of sizes of boats. Let's kind of face them having the other way. In fact, what I'll do is I'll have them set to random. There we go. Now I can kind of randomly place them. Oopsie, I want them set to random rotate as well, right here. Random rotation. There we go. Now I can kind of just set them up. And what's really nice to do is also put them into clusters. Let's say that you want to show that there's fishermen like casting their nets. Put a whole bunch of them side by side, and they're all working together using a larger net to kind of capture the fish. So it's kind of nice to throw a line right here, a line of boats, and what that will represent are fishing boats as they're casting a larger net, and then they're each in charge of sections of the net and then pulling fish into each individual boat. So kind of think about that when you're putting together your boats. Okay, so a lot of boats, there's a lot of activity going on down there, so I'm kind of satisfied with that. You could always add a heck of a lot more, but I think where it at looks nice. Let's go ahead and add in the last bit of details over here. So we'll want to add this idea that the water is moving. How is it that I want to implicate that there's movement in the water? Because right here, there is no implication, right? Even down here, there's no implication of which direction water is going outside of maybe the mist at the base of this waterfall. And so to kind of do that, what I'll do is I can use like waves, textures, lines, all these different things to kind of represent that. So I could type in a wave and just type in incarnate, and then there'll be a series of wave stamps that'll pop up for you. We'll just let it kind of pop up real quick. And then you'll see a lot of different options here. You've got like pond waves, you've got these pond waves, you've got these waves. There's a lot of different stuff that you can use. Let's try using pond waves first just to see what they look like. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to use the pen or the free draw. And then I'm just going to follow kind of this contour like this. And what we're going to do is create this illusion of waves. And I'll make sure to put that underneath of that. But we're going to put these waves in here. And we're going to create this illusion that there's motion. Okay, there we go. I think we got some nice waves there. I'm going to make sure that the stamps are below it so I'm not accidentally. I see that that's above, so let's bring that down a layer. Just want to make sure. There we go. Okay, that looks good. Some other things that you can kind of do to add more effect is if you want to create like this white water kind of effect, you can use a texture called snow. Cracked ice snow right here. Now you'll have to scale it because this comes from a different style. So you'll have to go to advanced settings, scroll down, go texture size. And what this represents is like white water. And of course, wherever you have white water is probably going to be where there's going to be obstructions, rocks, platforms. And so I'm just going to take this white color right here like this and just place it along the edge like this to kind of represent that water is colliding up against here and with speed, right? So all along this ledge right here to show that there's speed, I'm going to create what's called white water all along the edge here, along here. And then don't forget to bring the opacity down and then maybe have some along those waves as well, just to kind of give it a little bit of movement to it. So now it kind of has this sense of movement, right? And to show movement, white water and then waves, those work well. Now it's very clear that there is movement and it's moving quickly because of that white water up against the platforms, and the water goes underneath and then it goes out here. And we should probably do the same to over here as well, right? So I should probably take one of those white waves, and what I could do is even use this double one to give myself a little bit less work. And then I can just kind of place it along the base here. I think that's a little too much. Let's go back with this one instead. I think that looks good. And yeah, I think that looks good. And I'm just going to have it here. So the reason why I want to have some movement here is because there's a waterfall right here, right? And when there's pressure, water coming down and coming in contact with the water below, it's going to create a sense of like waves being emanating out away from it. And so what I can do is create this kind of sense of waves kind of coming down like this, kind of representing this idea that there's water coming from the waterfall and then kind of distancing itself, pushing the water out and away. One trick you can do is that you can take the waves that are furthest away from the water source and bring the opacity down to create this effect that the wave is beginning to diminish some of its force, right? As the water gets pushed further and further away, it loses its momentum. And to show that momentum change, you simply need to bring the opacity down. And then I can go ahead and do another one with the opacity down quite a bit. And then I have this final little bit of waves going kind of away from it. This is kind of give that illusion that there's movement going on. There you go, just like that. The other thing that you can do is you can show movement like a ship is moving or boats are moving. Right now, all the boats look like they're sitting still. But if I just add a little line that goes across like this and just bring the opacity up, then I kind of looks like that boat is moving, isn't it, right? So I can do that by creating this sense of motion. Now I have boats moving instead of just sitting still, right? They don't all look like they're just sitting completely still. There we go. There we go. I think that looks good. So now you have a lot of movement going on in the water. Okay, let's take a step back and look at it. I think it looks good. Let's go ahead and save and add in those final details. Okay. All right. The last bit is those crops, and I think we can just paint those in. Don't forget, I'll make sure to make this clonable so that you can edit it, change it, do whatever you want with it, okay? All right, let's see here. Some things I think we should do is add some water along the base of where the rock came in contact. Let's do that real quick. So along here, let's have some waves along that. That's going to make a lot of sense, right? Because it's coming in contact with the island there. So we'll go ahead and put those waves up. I'm not seeing it very well. Let's bring the layer up. There we go. Let's bring the opacity up. Let's bring it all the way up. And let's maybe bring the size up, or the stamp scale. Yeah, that looks good. Let's do that. Okay. Perfect. And I can go and add it all around the island here. Okay. Let's add some here and here as well. Okay. There we go. Just want to make sure that there is clear, that there's water along there. Here. Okay. Oops, that doesn't look right. Okay, there we go. Okay. Just want to make sure that all the water works out right. We have that dock. Okay, cool. Let's build those crops. I believe there should be crop in watercolor cities. Crops, let's take a look. Yep, plenty of them. Let's see here. Let's use a greener one. If you want to show that, like, let's say you want to show a different time of season. Like, let's say there's not much indication of what the season is. Crops are a great way to indicate your season. So if you want to show that it's like a full harvest, then don't maybe use the field planted light, right? Maybe if you want to show that it's like at the beginning of the season when you plant the crops, this is how you kind of implicate seasons, then use the field plant light or use these for full crop. Now, I kind of like this one because there's contrast with it. There's a cool green and then there's a warm brown color. And so I think that contrast will look good up here. So let's go ahead and add that in. Of course, I'm going to rotate it. And the way that I decide which direction crops are in is on the direction of where the shadow, where the light is, right? When you think about planting a crop, you want to optimize the maximal amount of light that the crop can get, right? And so having the crops being lined up in a way in which they optimize the amount of access to light. So let's maybe line it up in a way to where it does that. So let's rotate it like this, up against here like this, and I think we can just go right in and just fill in this spot. I might have to change the scale. Yeah, it looks like the scale might have to change a little bit. Let's texture scale. Let's bring it down about that small. I think should look good. And then we'll just go in and just kind of paint in the crops all along here like this. Here we go. And then what I want to do here too is I'm going to change the direction of the crops. I don't want them all to be facing this way. So with this one, I'll probably rotate it facing a different way. Let's have it going facing this way. So now I have that crop over there. And then let's do a different direction for this one as well. Rotate it, face this way, there we go. And then we'll have a little crop right up there. Okay. This is not how they get the majority of their food, but it's always good to have a little bit of like some kind of crop so that people can access it just in case there's a siege, because it looks like the majority of the food comes from commerce, right? And so, but some emergency crops at the top of the mountains here are going to be helpful for surviving something like a siege, an attack, any stuff like that. So now you have some nice crops here. Now you could add in some like small like farm buildings, you know, like maybe where there's farm tools and stuff that's stored. So you could take these buildings. Let me make sure that I have the scale right. Take these buildings. You can probably bring them up a little bit bigger if you want, just to show that they're a little bit larger. And you can just kind of place a couple of these along here. And of course, I'm not going to put crop underneath of that. I'll probably use a different texture. So I'll just take this different texture and kind of put it underneath. I don't even think that looks good. Let's maybe use a different one. I think a darker brown would look nice here. Let's see here. Let's use maybe this one right here. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I kind of have a brown textures here. I just don't want to, I don't want to have crop be just right where the buildings are. That doesn't make any sense. And then also, I might want to consider adding in some access. Like, how do you get to this spot? So what I could do is maybe have it be to where there is a mine shaft. Let me take a look. This mine entrance right here. Let's make a mine entrance, and then let's put it... Oh, there should be one with a rail. Let's put one right here, like this. And then what this is this represents, like, the food goes in through a rail cart, and then it goes underneath here, and then this part of the city gets its food that way. So that, and then that way you can't also siege from the top of the mountain either. It's a small little mine access where you can only really fit like food, like a dumbwaiter kind of thing. And so you really couldn't mount an attack with it. Okay, so we'll add that. And of course I'll add a texture underneath it as well. I don't want the crop just growing right on top of that. I do want to use a darker brown though. I want it to match more with the brown here, so we'll add that brown in there, and then we'll add in more brown right here, and then maybe a little path that leads over to it. And then maybe even a little road that kind of leads like this, and then it kind of goes around like that. There we go. And I'll put the path kind of going all around like this. I think that works out good. Let's go over to this side. Same thing here. We'll build a little path that goes along the base of the wall like this, and then we'll probably put like our little settlement over here, and then we'll also probably put the access point to maybe the mine over here somewhere. So we'll do that mine part right here. Actually, let's put it right here so it's right next to the settlement. And I'll just have the whole area be right here like this. There we go. And then I can go ahead and throw in those little auxiliary buildings all along here, here, here. There we go. Okay, just got to make sure there's some kind of settlements on that part and then access to get to that food. Okay, that looks good. Okay, all right. And then, of course, if you want to, you can always throw a little fence around things. I always like to throw a little fence around crops because it kind of, what happens if it's like a field where you have cows or something, right? What happens if there's some livestock or something? You want to keep them from falling off the ledge. So it always kind of helps to take like a nice line tool and then just kind of create this fence that goes around it. It's a little big and I need to change the opacity, but we'll do this, change the opacity. And so now you have this nice fence that goes around there like that. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll add a fence along this crop, another fence, and then we'll put another one all along here as well. That way, it kind of frames that space. There you go. Okay, I think that looks good. Yep, we've got that. All looks good. Let's add in one more fence right here. There we go. Okay. I think that's dang close to it. There are tons of more details that you could add to it. Like I noticed there's some negative space right here. I'm almost tempted to add some water right here as well. I could do that, but I think for now this is pretty much working rather well. I mean, we put everything together. I think we've got a lot of lore for the city. We've finished the dock area. We've added in movement in the water. We've added in our crops. We've got to have food sources. We've got to have some continuity with, you know, what's the order of operation for getting into the city, stopping at the customs, then stopping at Mistborn Docks, and then you can take the Aegor steps, and this is the Aegor steps. These switchbacks right here, this is the Aegor steps. That's that long climb that takes you up to here. Of course, there are tons of ways to get in the city that are not taking the Aegor steps. Like nobility can probably have a secret passage that goes up over here. Like maybe there's even a tunnel that goes from customs building, or maybe there's a private dock, or maybe there's something behind the waterfall that people can go and they can access this point, because obviously it's a lot of work to try to go all the way up these stairs to access the city, though it is also a deterrent, right? They only want the most able-bodied, not able-bodied, but the most, they kind of make the access to get to the city difficult to kind of deter people from kind of coming to it outside of maybe traders and stuff. So I think it's a part of the aesthetic and a part of the overall idea of the city. Okay. All right, so I think this looks good. I think overall we've got it. There's a lot more details that I could probably add to it, but I think where it is right now, the idea is there and the map is filled up. I'd say that there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of different places to explore. I would say that there's continuity in the overall design of it. Like there's, how do people get food? Does each district serve a purpose? Is the routes that lead to everything, is there a continuity in the flow of traffic? Is there proper access points? Is there depth? Everything seems to be here, I think, for the most part. I'll make sure to make this public. And then when I upload this to YouTube, I'll put the link in the video description. And that way you can edit it, play with it, and use it for whatever you want to do with it. And I think that is it for today. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it. I really liked seeing how lively the chat was. So I really appreciate everyone in the chat. And I will probably see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. Please stay safe and healthy. And of course, as always, merry map making, okay? I will see you all soon. Bye, everyone. Take care.